received. Please stay on the line for the next available representative.
I think I had a very unique experience on this. I mean, Bob Altman said to me once in New York, we're both the victims of my reputation, because everyone keeps banging on about improvisation. The fact is that I think that because he was so determined to make a very specific, accurate picture about this really very arcane group, there is very little improvisation in the final edit. I don't mean there was none on the set, because they would come on and in the little scenes there wasn't any. I mean, they played the scene, but in the huge scenes in the dining room or the drawing room or whatever, of course they would come on, they would say the scripted lines, and then the people who didn't have any scripted lines would say something, but by and large there's nothing of that left particularly audible, because the way those people talk is so specific, and that you could hear it the minute they left the page. They were suddenly sounding modern and middle class, and the whole vocabulary, as you know, is completely different. And so in a way I was protected by that, because Bob has a very good ear, he could hear, and very few of them, I mean, there are one or two moments. I mean, Maggie Smith improvises one line which really makes me laugh when she says difficult colour green. That was completely Maggie.
Or Kenneth Williams, depending if she's still channeling him,
right? But the truth is that those people have a rhythm, and I would say that Maggie, who's a very meticulous player, was very precise in her playing of the lines, and then of course completely understood the character, totally. But I think that in a way was very unique, and of course also I was on the set all the time, so I was running for, if they did need another line. When Geraldine Somerville was coming downstairs, they put the Stockbridges into that thing when they're coming down to tea, which they weren't in originally. And he said, "Oh, you can say something." And Geraldine came over and said, "Oh God, what shall I say?" And I remembered a line from a Norfolk house party when the couple had arrived, and the man took rather a dim view of the other guests, and said they thought they were rather arty. And the wife said, "Well, it's a relief to me to sit next to someone who isn't deaf in one ear." And so I said, "Oh, you say that." But of course that was the great privilege of being there, was to kind of also protect the narratives. I mean, by his own admission, Bob doesn't care about narrative, and I was there to say, "Oh, they must say the line about the dog bed, or the whole scene in the laundry won't work."
Did he really say it's not a whodunit, it's a who cares?
Yes, it's not a whodunit, it's who cares whodunit. And of course, the murder story is very secondary. I mean, that's just a kind of device, so they all have to stay in the house, and you don't care.
You have to
anyway.
wait an hour and a half for a murder. It doesn't follow anyone's rules.
Sure. And anyway, you don't care. You don't care about him being murdered, and you couldn't care. I think you're interested to know who's done it, why they've done it. You know Clive's part of it, but you want to know why they've done it. But you don't mind at all that nothing's going to happen to them. I don't think you could care less. So it's a very sort of different rhythm, but really it was protecting all the little stories, the Merediths and Dorothy and Jennings and Kristin and Henry Denton, and all that, because they're all done in tiny little bits. And it does interest me when people say to me, was there a lot of improvisation? You always want to say, how on earth do you think you could have improvised this film? Have you seen the film? Because all the plots are advanced by one word here, one line there.
What was your influence for writing on that?
Can I hear from you, gentlemen?
Oh,
but we'll pause a second.
No, don't worry.
As far as the mystery aspect, are you an aficionado of mysteries?
Well, I've done my time with them. I know that everyone arrives at the house and someone gets dead.
But was there something that in the back of your mind, the front of your mind?
What I did think was, my brief was that Robert Altman wanted to make a British film.
Right.
He thought it would be fun to set it in an English house party in the 30s, in a house where there was a whole servant class still going on, that the film would sort of pay homage to a kind of Agatha Christie genre, but that's not what it would be about. What it would be about is an examination of the servant-master interclass relationships, and it would be sort of servant-led. And we quite early on came up with this device that you never saw the upstairs people unless there was a servant in the room, which of course a lot of people don't notice, but anyway, it's there. And that was my brief, and then it was up to me to come up with whoever and whatever I wanted in the way of the characters and stories and things. And I suppose what I felt was that for the sort of spinal story, it ought to involve people from upstairs and down.
Right.
And I remembered this scandal I'd heard my aunt talking about when I was a child, of there was a chap in London called William Whiteley who had that huge...
Table's on fire.
Oh, look, through the glass.
Amazing. Let's see how long it goes before there's a delay.
It's interesting. And just shows you, you've got to be careful, haven't you, here? But there was a chap called William Whiteley who had that great shop at the end of Bayswater, which you probably know. It's a sort of shopping mall. And he had lots of other shops. He was a great multi-millionaire entrepreneur. And he used his female employees much as McCaudle does in the film. And in the end, there was this moment when they came to him and they said, there's a young man waiting for you down in the shop. And he went down, and the chap said, I am your son, and shot him, because the wives were, the mothers were sacked, and then some of them became prostitutes, and so on and so on. And in fact, it was wonderful, because if you ever asked, while it was still a shop, where he died, they all had instructions not to tell you. Of course, nowadays, they'd make a special event of it, wouldn't they? But, and I remember that story, and of course that isn't what happens to McCaudle, and that isn't his story, but it gave me the sort of first idea of a spinal story that would involve upstairs and down. And then working from that, I just, there were lots of things I sort of wanted to say about those people, I suppose, and so I had, like, for instance, there are 3 types of imperfect marriage among the upper classes. One is the woman who marries a man who is totally offensive to her, but has so much money that she can live in a way that only her grandmother lived.
Right.
The other is the woman who makes an absolutely acceptable class-equal marriage, but is bored to sobs. And the third is the one who marries for love, but runs the risk of not being able to live in the way that is expected of her. And the 3 sisters, of course, represent all 3 marriages. And in that fictional family on the screen, just as in many non-fictional families on Earth, the one who is regarded as the failure by the others is the one who is happily married to a man who can't make money. And so, in the film, it isn't until that Still Remade makes him understand that what he's got is worth something, that he sees that, because upstairs, what he has is worth nothing compared to what the others have. And that has always been rather fascinating me. I said the other day to someone I could name 8 peeresses now, although I certainly won't, who were all married to men they would not have looked at if they had not been endowed with rank and money. And I'm always terribly tempted to ask them, do they ever regret it when they're alone with them?
Right.
Because, of course, in those days, I think it was, even up to the war, it was more accepted because you were living in this vast panoply of people and you were sort of fulfilling rituals and things. And I think it was easier then to live with someone who you didn't dislike, but who, you weren't mad about, but you had, enough to get on with. I think we live so much more with our spouses and so much more alone and in much smaller houses and flats and things, that to live with someone that you're not mad about is much tougher for our generation, I think. That whole sort of mariage de convenance, most of those have become marriages of inconvenience in our society. Anyway, that was another thing, and there are sort of themes in the film that interest me. One of the main themes is the upper class's rejection of popular culture.
Right.
And I've grown up with that all my life, and of course, having gone into it, I can talk to moderately successful bankers who have made no mark in the world at all, who look down on me from 1,000 foot. It doesn't matter that I'm up for an Oscar. It is nothing to them. It is a sort of footling game.
What is an Oscar?
Oh yes, well what I had last week from one of my relations. Very good luck with your play. Louise tells me your play is going awfully well. Thank you.
This guy Michael Cox, when they were publishing my first book, and I had Lawrence Harvey wanted to make a film out of it, and we went to lunch with him. And Michael Cox, trying to fit in, said, I know another film actor. And Larry went, really, who's that? George Lazenby.
Oh, I'm sure that opened all doors. Well, my favourite was the other day, my wife Emma was at a dinner in London. I was out here for, I forget now, but anyway, some jamboree all to do with this. And she was having rather a sticky time, and the host leant down the table and said, Emma's husband, out in Hollywood, he's written a film, which is rather thrilling, isn't it? And her neighbour turned to her and said, the last film I saw was Mrs. Miniver.
Was she in her 80s?
No, he was a man, and he was, he was sort of 65 or something. But it's a curious thing that I think they resent the new aristocracy. I think it was part of feeling that the century was getting away from them, which of course it was. That was a correct analysis. And there is this kind of parable in the middle of the film when Ivan Novello is playing, and the upper classes are more and more bored with it, and the working classes are drawn to it. And really, what Altman and me, I suppose, what we're saying there is that the new world held something for the lower classes. It held almost nothing for the upper.
Right.
And really, they were looking forward to the past.
Right. I mean, look at the Caligula-like Mr. Russell Crowe the other night. I mean, what about that? Grabbing this poor.
Well, except the only thing I would say with those is that, I mean, actually, I was at the BAFTAs, not winning both my nominations, but I didn't see the incident. And I have been long enough in this business to know that when they get hold of a potentially good story, they will shake it about until it becomes a headline.
He apologized yesterday. And then, like, that wonderful moment in the Brothers Karamazov where do you remember Dmitri does something to the soldier in the eyes of his son. And finally at the end he has to come to the son and say, your father's a great man. And this is the same thing happened. The producer said, I just want you to speak to my son. And he did.
No.
He called the son, because the son obviously idolized him from Gladiator.
I mean, I think the other thing that is rather difficult always for the outsider is that the culture of the bodyguard,
Oh, that's, yeah, I mean, I don't mind him, let him be a tough guy himself, but the two security men of his had to lead the guy into the back room? No.
The only thing I would say, though, I mean, I don't know Russell Crowe. I've never met him. I've been bumped into him at about 5 minutes of these awards ceremonies, but I don't know him at all. But, I mean, over this, during the sort of the madness of Gosford, which has been going on since December, I am not famous. I am not famous now. Nobody knows who I am. I'm not at all famous. But because of the success of the film, I have had this kind of rush of publicity and people coming up to me and blah, 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 blah. And you do get a glimpse. I mean, it's nothing like the same thing, but you do get a glimpse of what it is like to sustain that level of fame all day, every day, all the time. I mean, I am sustaining a very small amount of fame for a period that will probably not last beyond the end of March. And even that, I was at something the other day and I was put into this reception, and these people, I couldn't get anything to eat and I couldn't get anything to drink, and finally some good Samaritan pushed a dry martini into my hand, which I never normally drink. God, I mean, I sucked it down like mother's milk, because they want something from you all the time. And I was reminded of that moment in Suddenly Last Summer, when Elizabeth Taylor says, they were crowding around him, they were putting him in their mouths. I thought, I don't know how really famous. Because the other difficulty is that with politicians or presidents or heads of big corporations or something who are famous, they're famous in a way where everyone knows who they are, but people do not all have a fictional relationship with them. The trouble with entertainers is that people have this fictional relationship with them. They imagine that if they could only talk to Russell Crowe would like them. So all they've got to do is connect with him.
And the next step is stalking.
And the next step is stalking. Well, I mean, I don't think most people go to that next step. But nevertheless, there is a kind of hunger, and there's a sense that you can fix their lives. And I mean, in this, I think particularly for me, because I'm 52 years old, I've written some TV scripts, as you know, and I've written, Christ knows enough, unmade film scripts. But this is the first script for a film that got made. I've won the Writers Guild, I'm an Oscar nominee, whatever happens. And I think an enormous amount of people who feel it's never going to happen are very encouraged by the fact that here is a guy to whom it happened at an age when most people have given up and they assume it's never going to happen. And now I appreciate that, because all through my 40s I did think this is nothing is ever going to happen that was on this level. I was quite a reasonably successful TV actor. I'm in a hit series and all that kind of stuff. I didn't feel I was going to have to take in washing, but there is something about that kind of A-list success being a player thing, that when you're 20 you think you're going to get it, and sometime around 38 it begins to occur to you that perhaps it's not going to happen for you. And I think because it did happen, I mean, I got the phone call at 50 that changed my life. I do have a lot of people coming up in that category. Now, I don't blame them, because I've been there. I know what that feels like. But at the same time, I know that I can't do anything. All I can do is say, don't give up.
Exactly.
And I find that sometimes almost, I kind of wish I could do something. I wish I was running a school for late starters or
I
something.
said to my mother years ago, I said, well, one of the moments of despair that we have in between being up there and down, I said, what kind of a profession did I choose for myself? And she said, it chose you. And it's always stayed with me.
But I think, I always say, because I'm sort of the only actor my friends know, because I live a lot of my life in non-showbiz world.
Civilians.
I have civilians, and I'm always being asked to talk to their daughter, their nephew, whatever it is. And I always say to them, look, if you could be happy doing anything else, then for Christ's sake, don't do it. If you're trying to choose between being a lawyer and being an actor, be a lawyer. But if you've got to do it, then do it. Because my complaint about acting, my writing experience has been slightly different, but my complaint about acting is just that you're underused all the time. You may be quite successful. I've always been pretty lucky, and I've always made a living, actually. I never had to do a second job or any of those other things. But you're so underused. You're working flat out for perhaps 4 months a year. And so many of the parts don't require anything of you.
You play the same thing.
You play the same thing, and it's usually, it's not that great the way it's written, but you can kind of box and coax it up into something. That's fine. And it's very enjoyable, of course. But it's just that thing of not being used. And of course, the great thing about writing is that you are used, you are stretched, and it's very demanding, and you're permanently having a nervous breakdown.
What prompted you to start writing? Or had you been writing years before?
I think it was always there. When I was in my early 20s, I forget now, but sort of 21, 22, in drama school, I wrote some novels. I wrote 3 sort of bodice ripper train reading novels.
Published?
They were published. Yeah, they were published. I made about 7 and 6 of them, but they were published. And I wanted, I suppose, then to prove that I could write something that got published. And then after that, then I'd done it. That thing that wasn't really for me. But then I went on, and I always used to kind of write the odd magazine article, or a friend of mine was a publisher of some educational magazines. I used to write in those quite often. And then I started writing for the Literary Review, and I used to do reviews of books. So it was always kind of somewhere in my life. And then what happened is that I was living out here in the early 80s. And
yeah, that's the missing part for me. What brought you here?
well, it was a funny time, really. I'd had this quite successful West End career on the stage, and I had been in the West End, I suppose, about 6 years, something like 74 to 80, only with the odd gap, but basically for about 6 years.
That's when I left.
And I'd been in hits, they'd run for a year and a half, whatever. And finally, I did The Present Laughter. I was Roller Maul to Donald Sinden's Gary Essendine.
Oh, to Simpson.
And I did that for a year. And during that time, I realized, that feeling you get sometimes when you think, my life isn't bad, but it's someone else's life.
Yeah.
I know I'm lucky and it's fine, but this isn't me. And I got that. And then my mother died in 1980, and she had had cancer for 2.5 years. And that had, I see now, I've said this before, but one of the interesting things about having someone you love die of cancer is at the time you think, oh yes, my mother has cancer, but actually I'm in love with this girl, and I'm doing this play, and I'm writing this article, and my life is so full. But when you get to the end of it and they die, you realize that whole period was the cancer, really. That all of your thoughts were about this disease that was killing your mother or your sister or your wife or whatever it was. And when it's ended, it's a very strange feeling. It's like being let out of prison or something in some way. And the feeling that I was leading some other life and the death of my mother all kind of coincided. And a chance came up for a job. A friend of mine in Florida spotted a job in Los Angeles that I was uniquely qualified for. They wanted I can't remember what it was now, but about 7 things, and I had them all. And she cut it out and sent it to me and said, if you ever want to get a green card and get a job in America, do apply for this job, because no one else will have all the qualifications.
Well, it wasn't an acting job.
No, it was it was to be a sort of advisor to a PR guy who was based in Washington, and he wanted someone who could cover show business, who could cover society, who had a degree, who was a published author. I mean, it went on, and I'd done them all.
Unbelievable.
And so I applied for it, and I got the job because I think he was rather amused that this English actor, had applied for this job, and I got. In fact, it folded almost immediately. I think 4 months later or something, he was invited to join the Reagan administration, and then that folded. But by that time, I was here, and I lived here for about 2.5 years up in Blue Jay Way, and I sort of acted. I would be in sort of Linda Carter vehicles for Rita Hayworth story.
Oh, you're in that?
Oh yeah, sure.
What'd you play?
I played the Ali Khan's sort of chauffeur and henchman, I think. A classic piece of filmography.
Oh.
I kept coming out from under the staircase saying, "Don't worry, princess, all will be well."
Who played Orson Welles in that? Do you remember?
I can't remember Orson Welles. I remember that. I remember that the Ali Khan was played by Arun Ipale, who was then enjoying a brief fling in Hollywood after the shooting party, and it looked as if he might make a go of it.
That was his second fling, because I knew him years ago out here.
He was quite a
And
character.
where is he now? He's an alias now.
Did he make a go of it out here in the end?
Again, he keeps getting.
It was so funny. I shouldn't really tell this on tape, but I will. Is that there was one scene, and we were shooting in this very pretty house actually. It had belonged to Deborah Carr out in the Pacific Palisades, and it was Linda and Arun and me. And he first of all he said, "Oh, I can't do this. The makeup, they're in my eyeline." So, and shooting in private houses is always a little bit of a jam in, And so they said, "Okay, hold the roll," and so makeup, so there were all these nice girls all file out with their bags and boxes and things, and then we start again, and it's no good. I can't do it. The wardrobe is in my eyeline. So then they say up, and the wardrobe, and the thing, and the bags, and the brushes, and the little things for taking flecks off your jacket, all out we go. And then, oh, lovely, thank you. And thank you very much. And so then we start again, and he says, "Oh, I'm sorry, I can't do this. Julian's in my eyeline." And at this point, the director, he said, "Arun, Julian's in the scene." He was something.
Oh, I did a Star Trek 12 years ago. And Patrick Stewart.
Oh, he's lovely there, Patrick. So nice.
Oh, but maybe he was just punchy by the time we got there. It was like 7 in the evening, and he said, "What's my airline? My hairline? My eyeline, damn it!" I thought, that's just some Freudian would have
This
a good
guy's
time with
tired.
that.
Yeah, he stopped worrying about his hairline quite a long time ago.
Airline, hairline, eyeline. In my research for this Saunders project of mine, he described his Oscar night being in frozen stupefaction, and described it as a top-flight Beano. The event.
Have you done Oscar night?
Yes, years ago. But I want to know what do you because it'll be interesting once it's over. What do you envision for yourself? How do you feel sitting there with Emma?
When it all started, which was really when I won the New York Film, Critics, whatever it's called. That seemed so extraordinary to me, and I don't think I quite understood that I was now on the awards circuit, because the awards circuit seems to me to work by separating about a dozen films from the rest of the year's output, and 4 or 5 of that dozen show up in every list of nominations from then on. And so you're part of this kind of club of rivals where you meet each other at award ceremony after award ceremony, at panels and boards and drinks parties and parties given by Vanity Fair and God knows what. And it seemed so incredible to me that I was kind of on that at all. I was very pleased that the picture had been well received, but I never ever thought it would be as popular as it proved to be with critics and public. So I was unprepared for that. Of course, I was very flattered. And then as it gathered momentum, and I got the National Film Critics, then I was nominated for a Golden Globe, I didn't get it, and nominated for the BAFTAs, and nominated for the Chicago, didn't get those either. Nominated for the Writers Guild, did get that. Was awarded the Show West thing for Screenwriter of the Year, which I collect on Thursday. I realized that I was on this kind of race that ended at Oscar night. And in fact, when we were all nominated, and I rang Bob to congratulate him, and he said, well, at least the movie's finished the race. And that is what it sort of feels like. And it seems extraordinary to me to be part, I felt this at the Golden Globes actually, to be part of these ceremonies that you're used to kind of flicking through in crumpled magazines in the dentist.
And now you're there.
And now you're there, and suddenly everyone's saying, Julian, look this way. Of course not, of course, if Halle Berry is coming up the carpet behind you, you can forget it. But as long as you've gone in with a lot of non-entities, then, you have your moment. Of course, obviously I'd like to win. I don't in any way feel confident that I have a real chance, because I think...
you can't do that to yourself.
I just...
Because you've got to just assume.
Yeah, you have to assume you've not won, I think.
Put it out in the universe either the other way, but...
Yeah, I think without being... It's lovely, yes, thank you. I think without being sort of specific...
You don't want to be Ralph Fiennes, who I'll never forget when he lost for Schindler's List. Half an hour later they cut to him and he was still brooding.
Oh my God.
He couldn't get over it.
I think the truth is, I've now had that thing, because New York, Show West and National, you're just told you've won.
Right.
Which is great. But the Writers Guild is that thing of, and the winner is Amelie. And when it is your name, it is extraordinary. It's like a kind of rush to the brain, And so I have now known that. I've had it once. But the truth is, usually you don't win, I think. And I think you have to be a bit depressed for a little bit. It is a little bit disappointing. But the great mistake, mind you, I made this mistake slightly at BAFTA, so I tell it against myself, is that when you're nominated for two things, you think you probably win one of them. It doesn't work like that.
What was the other one?
I was Best Newcomer as well as Best Original Screenplay, and because I was up against...
for a writer?
Yeah, but because it was the first feature, and because in a way it seemed that it was an extra... Anyway, whatever, I thought I might win one of them, and I didn't win either of them. And that was a bit depressing. But, although I did have a wonderful thing from one of the judges afterwards, who judged one of them, and because it's a lot of it's committee judging. And she goes, very nice, and she came up and she said, I suppose you're a bit disappointed. And I said, well, I am a bit, really. I said, but on we go. And she said, well, we felt that you'd had such success with this film, you didn't need our recognition. And I said, I think you have to be English to get that, really.
Yeah.
It was extraordinary.
Macmillan's were my publishers. And I had this young publicist with the white pearls, some Debbie girl who was flirting with something before she got married. And I called her with some ideas for some other interviews. And she said, well, we don't want to do too much. I said, oh, yes, we do.
John.
I couldn't believe it.
Why not? What is in your head?
I know. I called my editor and I said, get me somebody else.
Yeah.
Get her off my case. But it's not, one doesn't do that.
And it's also this thing of not rewarding success. I don't know, it's complicated really. You want to encourage people, I suppose, but I do think it's odd the way the British don't reward success. They reward kind of aspiration, but not success.
What was your father doing in Egypt?
Except for Judi Dench.
Was it 49 or 50 you were born?
49, he was in the embassy. He was the second secretary, I think, I can't remember. And he was, in the embassy. And so I was born in the Anglo-American hospital on the banks of the Nile. I've never been back, although...
Has the passport caused you any trouble?
Well, it was hilarious, because my father was born in Canada, and my grandfather in Australia, because we're an imperial family, and my grandfather was a younger son, and he took his sort of younger son's portion and bought a ranch out in Canada, where my father was born in 1912, and then in fact he was killed he died in the First World War, and so that was all the end of that. But my grandfather was born in Australia because he was out working with the governor of Victoria in reforming the Australian Army. And the Labour government in 1948 passed something called the British Nationality Act, which said if you weren't born in England and your father wasn't born in England, you're not English. And of course your mother didn't figure then. I mean, incredibly, the mother was not a factor in where you were born until the reign of Mrs. Thatcher. Isn't that extraordinary?
Right.
Anyway, so my father was frightfully vague, never really sort of did anything about it. And he, obviously we're all English because that's who we are.
Right.
And when I was 11, and I always travelled on my mother's passport, and when I was 11, he was posted to Africa, and we had to fly out there from school. And when they went to get my passport, they said, "Oh no, you must apply to the Egyptian embassy. His child is Egyptian." And there, my passport, my birth certificates, full of the stamp of King Farouk, and all that. And anyway, in the end, it was sorted out by pulling some string, but not for the last time. I thought, what do people do who have no strings to pull in those situations? I can't imagine. I mean, it was, I haven't drop. Well, actually, I have got a couple of drops of foreign blood, but I didn't have very foreign blood. But it was just one of those sort of anomalies. I mean, now it wouldn't happen because now my mother was born in London, and so now I would have a completely different thing. But at that time,
Apropos of nothing but my Saunders piece, because he and his brother and sister were born under the wing of the British consulate in St. Petersburg, etc., and he spent the first 11 years of his life there, and when he came and went to Vidale, he was treated strangely because he was foreign born. Did you ever have that at all? Was that
no.
You weren't converts, you were Catholics.
I was a Catholic, but
Right.
the reason was my grandmother, who was fairly crazy. My grandfather, I mean, the Fellowes are an Anglican family. I mean, they're not so much an Anglican family as the Anglican family.
Mm-hmm.
And she had married my grandfather, which was quite young. They were both young. And he then died in the trenches of meningitis in 1915, leaving a widow of, 24 or something, and one son, my father, at the age of 3. And anyway, some years went on, and she married a Catholic when my father was about 12.
Right.
And he was his brother became abbot of Ampleforth, he was really at the heat of the flame. And my father was converted to Catholicism at the age of 12, without much of a by your leave. And of course, to his father's family,
Oh my God.
they felt it roughly the same as if he'd been sold into the white slave trade, and they were absolutely furious with her. But interestingly enough, he took to it. I mean, he was a very kind of convinced Catholic in old age. And my mother was converted to marry him because that was done in those days rather more than it is now. And she was a sort of, she was never a tremendously convinced Catholic. I think she was a sort of deist. She regarded God as a sort of moderately prominent member of society with infinite understanding. She was always saying things like, God would never expect us to go to church on a day like this. And so I think we grew up with this image of this sort of incredibly reasonable God who was always taking things into account.
Right.
But I was content to be a Catholic. I mean, I am content to be a Catholic. I'm not one of the, people who say, oh, guilt, and I've had a terrible childhood because of it. I think these beliefs, keep one vaguely on track. I would say I was a lazy Catholic rather than a lapsed one, if you know what I mean.
Maggie Smith's character is your mother's aunt?
No, my father's.
Oh, really?
My grandfather's elder sister, who was a fairly sort of draconian character of the time. And she had that absolute lack of self-knowledge that was the armour of those people. And
the arrogance of ignorance.
Total arrogance of ignorance. But also, her own self-image. I mean, if you said to Constance Trentham, why are you being so horrible to Ivan Novelist, she'd be genuinely shocked. She'd say, what do you mean? Because it was their own image is of these gracious people who are always doing everything wonderfully. And also what I think Maggie gets so well is they're not wholly unadmirable. There was something about them that was tough, that you knew that in the siege at Lucknow they would have loaded the guns.
Exactly.
And they didn't fuss about whether their hotel room's bathroom was nice enough, all that stuff. That's not what those women were about. But they were, of course, absolute believers in their own rank and their own life and the way things worked. And they had no self-knowledge. They never examined their own their own beliefs at all. Their beliefs were right, and I mean, all her stuff about. I love all the way through, it's sort of memories really for me, but when she says on a day like this, I suppose we all have to pull our weight. Well, I mean, what is she doing to pull her weight? I mean, and that sort of slight judgment of everyone, and coming downstairs just now, I thought I'd been transported to a bar in Marseille. It's just that slight judgment of everyone all the time.
Are there any actual lines that your great aunt did say?
Well, I know my mother-in-law is quoted when she says, "I suppose it's fun having a film star staying, but there's always so little to talk about after the first flash of recognition." That's completely my mother-in-law. She was talking about going to a dinner party, and she said, "We said, well, it'll be fun, so-and-so's going to be there, so I suppose it's fun. There's always so little to talk about after the first flash of recognition." And that I thought I must put in. And I can remember my aunt not actually saying the line, but saying a very similar line to, "It must be so disappointing when something just flops like that." And this poor man's face, I think it was a concert, this poor man's face falling, because of course he couldn't sort of deal with that at all. Because you want to say, "You troublesome old bitch," but you can't quite because of the way it's phrased. That's their defense always.
I was wondering, if God is an Englishman, what is Mrs. God?
I know.
Everyone's mother. So funny.
But I mean, that world where what you do is nothing if you're in show business, I mean, that is half my world. And the most extraordinarily obscure and anonymous people will feel empowered to patronize you because you're making your living in show business. Quite extraordinary. Any old farmer's wife from Shropshire is entitled to look down on you.
My favorite, when people find out I'm a writer, it always becomes personal to them. What have you written that I might have read?
I agree.
Once I met a dentist who did it, and I said, "Whose teeth have you worked on that I might know?"
I might know, exactly.
Why
Whose accounts do you have in your bank?
Exactly. We are the only profession where people have the temerity, the arrogance.
What might I have seen you in?
I don't know.
And when I was young, I used to answer that question. I'd say, "Well, I was in..." "Oh, no, I never saw that." "No, I didn't see it." "Were you in that?" "I don't remember you in that." And this went on for about half an hour. And finally, I used to think, why am I doing this? They're not going to give me a job. And now I say, it sounds incredibly rude, but I never answer that question. Because you've never seen anything I'm in. And after half an hour, we're both incredibly embarrassed. If someone comes up and says, "Oh, I saw you in X, was it nice working in Dublin or something?" I'm very happy to answer that. That doesn't bother me at all. But it's this thing when you're almost like some sort of rug salesman getting out your produce and laying it out on the floor in front of them in order for them to sort of approve of you. It's absolutely extraordinary.
I dropped a script off somewhere a few weeks ago, and there was a FedEx man there. And he went, "You a writer?" I said, "Yes." "So what have you written?" So I looked at him and I just went, "The Grapes of Wrath." He goes, "I didn't see that. Was that HBO?" He could tell by the title it was obviously something that wasn't on the networks.
Terrifying.
Are Emma's Judy's ceremonial, or does she actually being the lady in waiting?
Well,
this is not an everyday job.
No, it's not a job in that sense, that you're not paid.
Right.
It's an honorary position. I mean, really what it is 9/10 of it is charity.
Right.
That part of the point of a royal family as opposed to a presidential one is that there are quite a few members of it. This is why all the business of cutting it down is so ridiculous, because the whole point of having a royal as opposed to a non-royal one is that there are enough of them to be connected to pretty well every major and quite a few minor endeavours in the country of charities in different areas and different this and different that. And they sort of connect it to the monarchy and they give a kind of official approval of whatever this endeavour is. And so Emma works for, the princess has a lot of charities she's quite keen on. And Emma does quite a lot of that and arranging the events and keeping the relationships going really between the charities and the Kensington Palace. And sometimes they travel together for this, that or the other, or go off and open an X-ray or whatever it happens to be. But really, most of it is charity. Or simply, what all the minor members of the royal family do is simply sort of connect the endeavour to the throne, really, and show that the throne is, because Her Majesty herself can't turn up at every sort of animal charity and provincial hospital, it's sort of not feasible. But by her relations doing it. It shows kind of palace approval and support for these endeavours. And that's what a lot of it is. I mean, if some of it is sort of court balls and state banquets and things, but a lot of it's slog. But she's, you know, you get interested. I mean, of course, I mean, she's been doing it for years now, and of course some of these charities are very important to her now. I mean, she takes them very seriously. Because of course you do get to really see the work they're doing. It's not like just writing a cheque and putting it in a Christmas envelope. You do actually see how they are spending the money, and you go off and you go to hospitals and this and that. And it is interesting as well as quite moving.
What did she make of you being an actor? Because you were
Well,
a working actor, I presume.
Oh yes,
Or
yes. No, I was a working actor. Well, they're both feast or famine careers, you know. I mean, and they're pretty good at sort of crisis moments with the, you know, the press or whatever else it is. I mean, all of that is rather crossover. I think she rather enjoyed. I mean, before she met me, she'd never been nearer the stage than Row E, and initially, I think she wondered if she was going to like that world, because that wasn't the world in which we met. But she's very gregarious, you know, and very funny and very good looking. She has the great bonus, I think, in show business of being very beautiful but not wanting a job in a film. And so every time she sat next to a director at a dinner party, you can see them freeze until they say, "And are you an actress?" And she says, "Oh no, I'm not in that world at all." And then of course they open like a flower. You can imagine, because they can very happily flirt with this beauty for the evening without ending up promising a reading or an audition. And so I think she enjoys it. I mean, she now, well, we've been married 12 years, but I mean, you know, she's very friendly with a lot of the people in show business now. I think her mother is still sometimes bewildered by the world in which her daughter operates, that suddenly, you know, we're charging off to some opening with a bunch of soap opera stars or something, and I think she finds that slightly puzzling, although, you know, she too has come to know and like some of our show business friends.
In quotation marks.
Well, it's just she doesn't see them as having the same objectives in life, and of course in a way she's right, because they don't.
But you haven't mixed them. You haven't dragged the whole bunch off to a stately.
Oh, I do. No, we mix them like Billy-O. But of course the thing is, one of the interesting things about mixing people is that the people you think will mix well are not necessarily the ones that do. Sometimes the stuffiest dowager is absolutely hilarious at a dinner with a lot of gay actors or whatever.
Yeah.
And other times you think, oh, they'll be great for this. And they absolutely freeze. And the same is true the other way up. I mean, I remember we gave a dinner party for some, you know, junior royals, and it asked a couple of very jolly actor types who we thought would beef the whole thing up, and they were absolutely mute except for one who got drunk and fell over. Whereas at other times, you know, you get terrifically good mixes. So I always think it's a bit of an art, that. It's easy in London. In the country, it's very difficult to mix people because they think they're going to be stuck with them.
Right.
And they're absolutely, they don't mind. If you've got I used to have a house in the country and I used to give dinners. If you've got a visiting guest, everyone wants to come to dinner and meet them because they know they can enjoy them thoroughly and not have to say hello to them in the village shop. But woe betide the country hostess who brings an arty-farty in from the local village, because then they're in hell because they think they're going to have to say hello to this person from then on.
Exactly.
But of course, if they're down from London, you know, nothing's more amusing than to be sat next to a stripper and a, you know, whatever. But that's dodgier. In London, you can mix anyone more easily. But no, we do mix up our worlds.
Michael Caine's always been the conduit between here and the Royals. And there's a producer called Leonard Goldberg, who was Aaron Spelling's partner for years, and his wife Wendy, whose sister is Tony Howard. She's a big at ICM. She's an agent there. She was desperate to meet the Royals, begged, and Michael mentioned it, and she said, "Oh, by all means, bring her." And they had the dinner, and whoever it was came in, and their face dropped when they saw Wendy Goldberg. And the apprentice said, "But she's not black."
Why would she be?
They thought it was going to be Whoopi Goldberg.
Oh, I see. Oh.
The evening
Of course, Michael Caine knows them all.
Oh, yeah.
He knows a lot of
I'm
them.
surprised it took him so long to become a knight, frankly.
The English are not good at recognizing film success. They will knight or dame actors and actresses of whom most of the world has never heard if they are stage players.
Right.
But Cary Grant or Deborah Kerr or Audrey Hepburn can go to their graves unrecognized by the establishment, having been world stars. It is a mindset that I do not even pretend to understand. And I think under this government, I think it has changed a bit. And they've given gongs to Julie Andrews and to Elizabeth Taylor and people perfectly correctly, in my opinion, because these people have reached millions. But for years, the British establishment has got this thing that somehow it's the stage that divides the men from the boys, and you hear always British stars say, I must get back to the stage, and all this stuff. And of course, I think it's held them back, because film is a different thing. It's a real art form. It requires different gifts and different talents. Some people have both, but what held back film, I think, in England was this notion that when you were training, and I remember it, you were learning your stagecraft, and film was something you sort of did to pay the mortgage. And I think I thought that in a way, although I always preferred going to films and theatre, until when I was living in America, I suddenly realized that film acting, camera acting, not film, television or film, was difficult. And this was something one had to get the hang of, and one had to look at and examine and learn how to do, and look at your own performances and see why you were a bit better in that and rotten in that and all the rest of it. And for me, it was tremendously instructive to spend those years in Hollywood. I'm not one of the Brits who hates Hollywood. I love Hollywood. I've always had a very nice time here, and I have lots of friends here, and I think it's a factory town. I think you live here because you want to work in film or possibly television. I don't think I'd come here if I wanted to paint. But I think it is an interesting town, and I think that the British establishment's tendency to patronize the film industry has been their downfall. And, I remember someone the other day saying, oh, you could tell the stage players at the awards because they walked up the steps properly and they did this and the other, because the film people find it so hard, if they haven't got marks or something. And I thought, come on, wake up. They are the people that people dream of now. They are the ones who engage the public imagination. If you want to make the public change their mind about something, for Christ's sake, make a film about it. Don't waste your time on a play.
They haven't had Hignett cigarette cards in years.
West End plays.
Don't.
No.
Yes.
No.
But anyway, that's what I feel.
Who are the other toffs in the business besides you? I remember James Villiers was definitely...
James Villiers was a toff. Chris Casnev is a toff.
Oh, is he?
Oh, yeah. Chris Casnev's a toff.
The Foxes were.
The Foxes are...
Or they're lying. They're not descended from...
Foxes are showbiz toffs, which is different. They're...
But they weren't descended from that fox all those years
No.
Ah.
Their grandfather was Frederick Lonsdale, who was a great actor-manager. They come from a very interesting family. It's not that they don't. Their mother's father was Frederick Lonsdale. But they're not toffs in that sense.
Right.
Jeremy Child, do you know him, the actor? He's a toff, he's a Bart. John Standing.
Oh, yes.
He's a toff. Marcia Fitzallen, who's the daughter of the Duke of Norfolk.
And what about yours? Were there any real ones years ago, or were they all...
Well, I was rather interested. The other day I was reading a biography of Sheridan, and his father, Thomas Sheridan, was an actor. And I was absolutely fascinated that in the 1760s, he brought a case for libel against some man whose name I forget, for saying that an actor could not be a gentleman. Isn't that rather interesting at that time? So clearly this has been a tussle, which is an ongoing affair. I think on the whole, apart from the odd sort of mad younger son from an Anglo-Irish family, it wasn't an area that claimed tops very much. I think it began to change in the 30s and 40s because drama schools were seen as quite good finishing schools for girls by some people, and it was thought that a couple of years as an actress would make them,
girls,
and they'd be confident in the public speaking and things that would fall to their lot when they were ambassadresses and married to landowners and things. And so you've got a little bit of crossover, and you get those sort of Diana Napier generation, Valerie Hobson, and
Oh, was she?
Yeah, I think Valerie Hobson was. Diana Napier certainly was a lady, and I can think of a few names of women who you wouldn't have heard of because they didn't go on to become stars, but they spent their 2 or 3 years in nice comedies in the West End before marrying bankers. And you get sort of Jean Tierney and people in America. I mean, Jean Tierney was the lady, so
Right.
was Audrey Hepburn, you know.
Right.
I think it was beginning then. I think for men, it was madder, because the point about a girl was if she was pretty enough to be an actress, the chances were she was going to marry, and it was all
Right.
going to come to a satisfactory conclusion. And Sally Gray would go off and become Lady St. Aubyn or whatever she was, you know. I forget, she married Lord something.
Oh, she was gorgeous.
And she was gorgeous, and that was, then she'd have her few years of being a star, and then she'd be Lady something, and then that would all be very satisfactory because she'd be more interesting than Lady something else. But I think for men, I mean, one of the great differences in my adult life is that when I was a child, there were safe and acceptable careers. Of course, now there are no safe careers. I mean, people become bankers or soldiers, and they're turfed out on their ear. Teachers, you know, all these things that if you did in the old days, you were safe. And I think in a way it's made the world kinder to the unsafe careers. If people now say they want to be a writer or a painter, it's no longer quite as bonkers as it was when I was young. But it was pretty crazy when I did. I mean, my advantage was that I didn't come from a professional family. I came from a family where they'd all been, in the old days, soldiers or sailors or farmers, you know. And since there wasn't any land left and nobody seriously expected me to go into the army or the navy, it wasn't as if I came from a family of bankers and there was the bank. And I remember my father once saying to us, if you have the misfortune to be born into a generation that must earn its own living, you might as well do something amusing. And so they weren't bad. I mean, I went to drama school after I left Cambridge, and my father sort of in hell because he had to do another 3 years of education thinking he was about to get out. But they were supportive. And the only rule they did make is that I wouldn't have any allowance after the end of drama school. That was it. Not because they were horrid. I mean, I could live at home for nothing. But because if I couldn't make a living at it, he wanted me to have to address that at a pretty early stage while it was still time to do something else. Of course, at the time it was rather harsh, but now I think it was probably quite sensible. But anyway, I did make a living, and here I am today.
That's right. That's right. Why aren't you in the movie?
No.
There was no role? You didn't think of, maybe I'll put a nice little thing that would be perfect for me?
Well, there was a moment when Bob and I thought I was going to do something, and then I went home, and Emma said to me, really, trying to persuade them you're a grown-up, and now you want to go and play with the children. But, so then I went in and I said, I don't think I should do it. I think it's too complicated.
You've got a clever wife, too.
And in fact, 3 weeks later I cut the part. So...
was he a guest, or did he...
No, I mean, he wasn't a guest, he was a lawyer. There was a whole will plot that was shot, actually, but then was cut out of the film, but he was part of that. No, I think, because I was on the set the whole time, and I was doing all this stuff of checking details and making up lines and of changing information, I think trying to then rush off and be an actor and come out worrying about my mascara would have just been one hat too many. So I don't think it was the wrong decision, I think it was the right decision.
I think we'll almost sort of turn off the dish. I've got all sorts of women to ask you. You might be answering forgotten parts of my life.
Only with no tape.
Yeah, no, I'm sure that's all set. The Widow Douglas, as I always called your drama school. Did you have any fellow classmates who went on to...
Tony Sher, who was knighted and all that stuff, was there with me. Not really. I mean, some working actors who used names you wouldn't know. Charlotte Cornwell did quite well for a time. My great friend at drama school actually is Holly Pallets, who now edits the Santa Barbara Journal and lives, in fact, in Bel Air. She was my great sort of mucker at drama school, so it's quite funny. I mean, actually, there has been some lovely bits of this. I mean, for instance, one of my oldest friends in Hollywood, when I first arrived
I can
here,
sell this twice, I'll sell it to Holly.
but he just arrived from Madison, Wisconsin, and he was this little, trying to set himself up as an agent, music agent. Little guy, bald, called Sam Schwartz. And he and his wife were living in sort of North Hollywood somewhere. And I was in his and we used to sort of, run around together. 20 years on, I'm here as this Oscar nominee. He is now one of the heads of Gorfaine Schwartz, the biggest music agency in this town, and lives in a glass palace at the top of Beverly Hills and collects modern art, And there's
he was
something.
in Weber Douglas?
No, it wasn't Weber. No, this
Oh.
is just my beginning
Right.
days in Hollywood.
Right.
And there is something so hilarious to us both that now, we've had dinner last night in Spargo's because we have together done the whole Hollywood journey. And I find it rather a luxury to have old friends in Hollywood, and Sam and Holly, because he was the basis of Weissman. Because I took him to stay with my father and stepmother in Gloucestershire years ago. And he arrived, and he liked them, they were very nice, but it was so alien a world that he found that when he went to bed, he actually got his umbrella and put it by the bed in case he was in danger in the night, because he just felt he'd left the planet. And he started thinking, nobody knows I'm here. What if I and that really was the inspiration for Weissman. But I think it is a luxury to be suddenly out here at 52 and to find you actually have old friends here.
That's wonderful. I think we did it.
Have I done it?
Yeah, now we can...
Of course, the
Let
truth
us
is-
now praise Robert Altman.
Yes. The truth is that not everyone can point to a single person and say that person changed my life. Robert Altman has changed my life. And he did it by taking a chance on someone when every instinct he had must have been telling him to find someone more experienced, and then never letting me be replaced or added to as a writer, so that I am still the sole writer.
But where is Balaban in between that? Didn't he recommend you?
Oh
to
God,
Altman?
I mean, Balaban is the link, and I am prostrate
Yeah.
with gratitude, but the truth is that it was Altman who had the muscle
Right.
to preserve me as sole writer, and he did. And that is why I am the only writer of this film, because he felt we had, together evolved a voice, and he didn't want it diluted with the usual polish by someone who didn't know anything about the subject. But to have someone who is prepared to go into bat for you that much and preserve your position that much, I think is rare. I mean, I'm sure it would have been easier for him at a certain stage, because it wasn't an expensive movie in movie terms, but it's still enough money, to build a small industrial town. And I am very, very grateful to him, and I do feel that I'm sure. All my life people have done me favours, and I'm grateful to all of them, and I'm sure there are more favours to come. I certainly hope, he said, touching wood, but I cannot believe that there will be anyone who makes as great a change in one leap. He gave me a pair of 7-league boots. I took one stride and was in another country. And that won't happen again. Enough.